Certainly, readers could read through the print-based comic without using a mobile device to unlock the bonus material, and the narrative really wouldn't suffer. However, using the mobile device to reveal extra content does nothing but provide the reader with a richer experience that offers insight into the narrative from the creators, deleted scenes, and glimpses of what is to come. In short, the content unlocked using digital tools truly does build upon the original narrative. Additionally, using the mobile device goes beyond the physical act of turning the page, scrolling, or pointing and clicking. These comics are essentially a hybrid text, blending print and digital content. The print content is the narrative, and the digital content is akin to the kind of bonus material found on DVDs and Blu-rays. As such, this kind of interaction begins to more closely mirror an at-home cinematic experience, which naturally changes the kind of interaction taking place between the reader and the text. Additionally, this hybrid form of content finds a unique way to get around the constraints of print for comics. In this case, digital tools are not used to replace the print text, but rather used to amplify the printed text. So in conclusion, where McCloud sees Infinite Canvas comics as a way to fulfill the potential of all comic books and graphic narratives, I see Infinite Canvas comics, particularly those embracing the tenets of ergodic and hypertextual literature, as a way to fulfill the potential of digital comics. It is important to clarify that I'm not advocating for digital comics to rescue print comics, or that I believe print comics to be jejune, ephemeral, or not worthy of reader consumption. Rather, I suggest that digital comics offer a way for graphic narrative to continue evolving by exploring aesthetic, material, and interactive possibilities. Indeed, I should note here that I recognize digital reproductions of print comics to be a valuable tool in enticing new comic readers. For example, in March of 2013, Marvel offered free digital downloads of all of their #1 issues. That is, you could download the first issue of Daredevil, Spider-Man, Captain America, any #1 for free. Clearly, this was a way to entice new readers into the Marvel fold. Additionally, the ability to quickly and relatively easily rope in new readers by disseminating a wide range of stories at an affordable price is a sound business tactic. The hope is that by offering digital comics in a digital format, readers will be enticed to not only continue reading digital copies, but perhaps explore the print versions as well. Additionally, it should be noted that digital comics that strictly reproduce printed material are usually a much smaller file than the kinds of digital comics I'm talking about, and thus it's easier to store. Moreover, some of the digital comics that we're going to be talking about and that we've already talked about require very specific devices. While certainly mobile devices are becoming much more common, not everyone has an iPad or a smartphone. Thus, some people would miss out on that kind of amplified content. So there are restrictions to the kinds of digital comics that I'm talking about. That said, I do maintain that only producing digital comics that reprint print comics limits the potential and future of digital comics. Tonight, I call for digital comics to be wary of remediations akin to Bolter and Bruson's immediacy, and I offer possibilities for digital comics to embrace hypermediacy. These possibilities for digital comics will pave the way for this medium to be a pioneer in the construction of new media texts and the subsequent reader-text interactions. Thank you for listening to that long bit, but now I want to show you a couple of cool things that's going on that sort of exemplify what I'm talking about. How many people are familiar with Mayfire? Anyone stumble across this? So as I said, about a year or two ago when I first started this research, there were not a lot of unique digital comics. Almost everything was based on replications of the print-based. It was just virtually scanned-in versions of what you could buy at a comic book shop. You buy it for a discounted price, and you don't have the material copy. But ironically, shortly after I published this research, or maybe because of my research, people started exploring exactly the kind of remediations that I'm talking about. So I want to show you a couple of things that people are doing. Mayfire is created by a couple of comic creators. The most notable one that you might be familiar with is Dave Gibbons, who is the artist of Watchmen, a text that you may be familiar with. And they launched this company, and DC, IDW, Image, they're doing some work with them to really reconceive their comics. So let me turn up the sound here, and we'll watch this promo. All right. It's going to reboot. Mayfire, let's turn down the volume a little bit so we don't have to listen to their annoying sound. So Mayfire, you can see they're doing a lot with sound. They're doing a lot more with motion. And what's really interesting about Mayfire comics is even though they have the ability for sound, they still have those onomatopoeia words that accompany the sounds, which I think is really interesting. Instead of replacing it, they keep those. Oh, that's nulls. That's what we're listening to. I'll get rid of that. So the next one that I want to show you is DC's Multiverse Squared. Anyone familiar with DC Multiverse? Multiverse Squared? Sort of, a little bit. So this was released 2013. They launched this new line of digital comics, partnering with Mayfire, which I just showed you. So Mayfire is the platform to release these new kinds of digital comics, and then DC partnered up with them to release some very specific titles, specifically Batman 66, which is based on the old Adam West Batman TV shows, and then Arkham, the Arkham comics, which are based on the popular Batman Arkham Asylum games that you may or may not be familiar with. So I wanted to show you this promo as well.
Hey guys, welcome back to SourceFed Nerd. I'm Trisha Hirschberger, and for anyone who's a fan of DC Comics, dynamic artwork, and or the Choose Your Own Adventure book format, I've got happy news for you. DC Squared and DC Squared Multiverse are a thing now. If you like your comics of the digital variety, that is. Now, I know many people were not so much a fan of the motion comics of years prior, but DC Squared is supposed to have much more finesse and play off the fan favorite Adam West show. Batman 66, a digital comic based on the classic Batman TV series, will be the first to show off this new comic book tech this summer. Now, DC Squared Multiverse is where the ability to dictate the storyline comes into play. Do I follow Harley or return to the Batcave and take a sweet joyride in the Batmobile? We'll start seeing this type of comic in conjunction with the Arkham Origins video game this fall. And according to DC Entertainment co-publisher Jim Lee, readers' choices may even have a hand in future storylines, or be able to vote on the fates of certain characters. This gives fans a way to communicate with the publishers, and that's pretty freaking awesome. Also, replay or reread value would be huge. The only downsides to letting readers determine plot is that we may end up with safer choices, or it could end up like the 1988 1-900 number Colin vote to kill off Robin. No word yet on if DC Squared and DC Squared Multiverse will be released on all mobile platforms, but if it is available on Android, I'm 100% in. So what do you think? Is DC Squared or DC Squared Multiverse something that you're looking into? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already.
Okay. And she pitches her thing. So DC Squared, DC Multiverse Squared is really interesting because it allows you to kind of choose which character you want to see the story from, and then you get to make the character's decisions. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure in a digital sort of environment. And as she said, you know, the replay factor becomes really big. And then, of course, because it's using the Mayfire platform, it has the sound elements to it, the motion elements to it, and I should add that a lot of the motion elements are controlled by you, the reader. You can scroll and use the mouse to sort of click and drag to see the perspective from, to see the action from different perspectives. So again, a really different kind of reader text interaction. I'm just going to show you a couple of other possibilities and then open it up for some brief conversation. This one is The Witcher, and you can see this is for iPad and iPhone. It's an interactive comic. It's pretty different. So here again, you can see that they're using the swipe sort of reader text interaction, and you can do lots of different things, even taking clothes off of characters. So you can again see what digital comics are moving towards in terms of how much control a reader can have over the narrative. The last one I want to share with you is one from Cognito Comics, and this is CIA Operation Ajax. I really recommend checking this out. Anyone familiar with this one? This is really cool. You can get it available in many different platforms. And this is another sort of way that you can, an example of amplifying a comic.
Introducing Operation Ajax for the iPad, based on actual events of the CIA's involvement in overthrowing the Iranian government. A bold and original interactive graphic novel that redefines digital comics and the art of storytelling in 210 handcrafted pages. Navigating the comic is easy and intuitive. Tap or swipe to read the next page or to go back. Touching the middle of the screen gives you more control and lets you dive deeper into the rich history surrounding the story. At the bottom of the screen, we can flip through pages. It's also easy to jump to different chapters. A handy guide can be called up to provide a synopsis of the cast of characters. Occasionally, you'll see a star while reading. Touch it to pull up additional information about key story points, historical documents that have only recently been declassified, and even newsreels from the era. Operation Ajax by Cognito Comics. Experience it at the App Store.
So here again we see a comic really trying to make use of the unique digital affordances. It's linking to different things. You can pull up tons of information that would, in a print version, take up a really hefty tome. If you wanted to reproduce those historical documents, which they have quite a substantial amount, it would take up a significant amount of space and also drive up the price of the graphic narrative. Moreover, it gives you the option if you want to pull up more information on particular characters. You don't have to do it. It's not going to affect the narrative, but you can, through different clicking, or pressing of buttons, you can pull up more kinds of information. So this is a different kind of amplification, a little bit different than the augmented reality from Marvel. So I just wanted to share those with you so you can kind of have a concrete idea of what I'm talking about, visualize the kinds of things that I was talking about as I talk about challenging digital comics to sort of move beyond just reproducing print-based comic in their digital venues, but rather really expanding it and taking advantage of really the many affordances that you have as a digital comic creator. So I'm happy to open it up for, we've got about 10 minutes or so for conversation or anything of the like. Yes, sir.
I thought it was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
But when does the term comic not apply? I mean, with that Witcher comic, I mean, that whole franchise is already being done the same exact way, only with better graphics, and it's more interactive. How can that kind of comic draw somebody in whenever a video game is so much more immersive?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. First of all, let me answer your first question, or at least address the first question, which I think is really astute, which is, when does a comic cease being a comic and become something else entirely? And that's a really important question to ask, and it's one that people are still asking, even about print-based comics, because there's no agreement about how you actually define what a comic book is. And one thing academics love to do, and I think all the professors here will agree, that we love to argue about definitions of things and pitch our own definition of a text. So people are still couching different things of what a comic book is. So some people would say that really the only thing that makes a comic book is sequential art. And as long as art is being used to sequentially tell a story, however that sequencing is arranged, then it's still a comic. So that's how I would answer that question, and I think it's a really good question, and one that we could definitely spend a lot of time on, and papers could be written about. As far as, though, how can it be a useful recruiting tool when video games are still certainly way ahead of the curve in many ways? I think because it's still new and different. People are still interested to see what new things are happening to digital comics. Certainly, in some ways, the technology is behind video games, but it's still new for the medium of comic books. So comic book readers, it's still something different. And then, of course, and I think video games are definitely affecting digital comic production. And I think there's a lot of crossover in the two industries to begin with. So I think a lot of people who dabble in video games are taking things that they've learned designing video games and applying them to comic books. So I think you're going to see an ascent very quickly in the development of digital comics. I really do.